emerging economies, and they're also important members of the UN as well as other important international organizations. And their bilateral relations have continuously grown, especially in the last 2 decades. And that is why we're here today, to facilitate dialogue between them, to help build an understanding of modern Indonesia. For 10 minutes each. For the opening remarks, I would like to call Professor Dr. Muhammad Idris, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Peshawar. Sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. His Excellency Adam M. Tojo, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to Pakistan, Dr. Tuku Fisisia, Deputy Foreign Minister for Indonesia, for Information and Public Diplomacy of Indonesia, keynote speaker from Indonesia, Dr. Abdul Karim Gaffar, keynote speaker for Pakistan, Professor Sayyid Hussein Shahid Saharwardi, Muhammad Faisal, Dr. Sajar, Dr. Suleiman Khan, my dear students, Assalamu alaikum and Ramzan Kareem Mubarak to all. First of all, I take this opportunity to extend my gratitude on behalf of the University of Peshawar to His Excellency, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to Pakistan, for arranging this online internship program with the clear aim to increase better understanding about the modern Indonesia. Your selection of University of Peshawar for this important program reflects the importance that is attached to this old and great seat of learning by the Republic of Indonesia. It is important to mention here that the diplomatic relation between the Republic of Indonesia and Islamic Republic of Pakistan were established in 1955. Indonesia has the world's largest Muslim population, while Pakistan has the world's second largest Muslim population. Both the countries are member states of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC. The two states are also parts of the D8 countries. Both the countries have signed various agreements on economic, defense, diplomatic, and strategic spheres. With every passage moment, the mighty brotherhood becomes stronger. University of Peshawar is ready to sign agreements with several Indonesian universities, and we hope that with the passage of time, collaboration between University of Peshawar and Indonesian universities will further strengthen in the higher education. I hope that this activity will enhance the knowledge and awareness of the students about the existing potential and opportunities of development of both the countries by sharing the lessons from the past and modern era. At the end, once again, I would like to thank His Excellency Adam M. Tojo and his team, Professor Dr. Sayyid Hussein Shahid Saharwardi and his team, to convene this important online internship program. I am sure this one-month event will provide enough food for thought to all the attendees, and wish you all academic stimulating days ahead. Thank you so much all.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I would request the esteemed Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to Pakistan, Mr. Adam Tojo, to have the floor for the introductory remarks.
Thank you very much, Aisha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. His Excellencies, Ambassadors, Dr. Tengku Faizasa, Deputy Minister for Public Diplomacy, Information and Public Diplomacy, Professor Muhammad Idris, Honorable Vice Chancellor of University Peshawar, Professor Dr. Muhammad Idris, and distinguished speakers, Professor Dr. Said Hussein Shahid Saharwardi, and Dr. Abdul Gaffar Karim. And dear students, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It is indeed an honor for me to host together with Peshawar University the online internship program. I think Vice Chancellor already mentions the objective of the online internship program, which we hope that would encourage more students in Pakistan to learn and see not only the similarities in terms of the cultures, the educational background, the histories, but also to some extent we are, we have independence almost at the same time. So the challenges are the same. So with the sharing best practices and the lesson learned of Indonesia in facing the challenges that we face in the socio-economic and political dimensions, we hope that we would once again allow the opportunity for both sides to expand further the collaborations. I'm very pleased to, first, certainly I'm very touched by the generosities of the people in Peshawar. In Peshawar, we know they have one Sukarno chalk in the middle of Peshawar town. So I was touched by, once again, the appreciations of the people in Peshawar toward our founding fathers by naming one of the busiest chalks under his name. So I think to pay tribute to once again, not only to our founding fathers, but also Indonesia's founding fathers, but also to once again express our appreciations to the people of Peshawar. We are planning now also to establish Indonesian's Corner in Peshawar University. And I thank the Professor Muhammad Idris and his teams for once again his willingness to provide one of the facilities in the universities of Peshawar to the establishments of the Indonesian's Corner. The Indonesian's Corner will serve as a hub, for us to introduce more about Indonesia, not only the culture, social, economy, and also politics in Indonesia. So once again, with that we would be able to bring more people-to-people connections closer. And this is one of the programs that we hope could be part of the could be part of the Indonesian's Corner, the Indonesian's online internship program. The second project that we are also in the process of making, we will organizing a night at museum programs in Peshawar museums, because I think there's a confluence of civilizations between the two countries, not only in Islam civilizations, but also in Buddhist civilization. And I think a part of that, there will be also part of the exhibitions which will highlight the ancient civilizations which we can trace, the confluence even before Buddhist civilizations and Islamic civilizations in both two countries. So we are planning to organize, once again, a night at Peshawar Museums programs later this year. So that also would be part of the Indonesian's corner that will be established in Peshawar University. Other than that, certainly, we are also very keen to introduce Indonesian cultures programs like, Pencak Silat, which now has also become popular in Pakistan. So without further ado, once again, I would like to express our appreciations to Peshawar University, to Vice Chancellor Professor Dr. Muhammad Idris, and also the team. I think I would remiss myself if I don't mention it is because of the hard work of the teams of both sides, led by Professor Dr. Syed Hussein Shahid Soherwardi and Mr. Boy Darmawan of the embassy, who managed to arrange these programs and to allow these the programs to happen and to fill the holy months of Ramadan. Now, once again, I would like to extend our appreciations to all of you, and also a special thanks goes to Deputy Minister, His Excellency Dr. Tengku Faisal, who finding his busy schedule to join us in this opening ceremony. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your words. I would now request for the keynote speech for Dr. Tuko Fezashia, I hope I'm saying this right, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Information and Public Diplomacy, to please take the floor.
Thanks so much, Ms. Aisa. You pronounced my name very correctly. Your Excellency, Mr. Adam Mulawarman Tugio, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to Pakistan, Vice Chancellor, Peshawar University, Professor Dr. Muhammad Idris, Chairperson, Department of International Relations, Professor Dr. Sheikh Hussein Shahid Suherwadi, distinguished resource persons, participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be upon us all. We say good afternoon, still afternoon here in Indonesia. Firstly, I wish to congratulate His Excellency Mr. Adam Tugio, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to Pakistan, for organizing this series of discussion on Indonesia. And I feel privileged for the invitation to say a few words at this August forum. On the onset, I do hope this program can help increase better understanding on Indonesia, as well as better awareness of our respective countries, especially among our young generations. Such awareness will helpfully contribute to the strengthening of the already good relation that we have, and also especially as well to the strong of people-to-people connection. I wish therefore to express my sincere appreciation to all parties that made possible this online internship program. Hence, I'm honored to welcome all of you to the online internship program, The Contemporary Dynamics of Indonesia 2022. The objective of these programs are very clear and I should say commendable: to increase better understanding of modern Indonesia through dialogues, to strengthen people-to-people relation through studying lessons from the past and in the modern era, and to enhance knowledge about the existing potential and opportunities of development between two countries. Such a noble objective, and I'm sure that with all the many programs that the ambassador has organized, they will further enrich the relation between our two countries. And I must say that this program is very much in line with the public diplomacy works within my office that at the moment, just for information, we cover a wide range of responsibilities from development cooperation, media relations, and also public diplomacy. So this event is very much in line with our work in public diplomacy. Distinguished guests, our two countries has a very rooted mutual respect, and this is translated in the strong relation that we have over the years. While the bilateral relations were established in around the 50s, relation and connection among our two peoples was developed a lot earlier during the pre-independent period. Our people-to-people connection continued to grow until these days. There are quite numbers of Indonesian students in Pakistan, and I believe the number will continue to grow. And at the same time, there are a few hundreds families of Pakistani origin living in Indonesia. Many of them are engaged in businesses such as restaurants, precious stones, textile items, herbal medicines, and Pakistani expatriates in Jakarta are also working in important positions in multinational companies and various UN agencies. Certainly, all our diaspora, your diaspora in Indonesia and our diaspora in Pakistan have made great contribution toward the development of both development of our relations and also the economic development of our countries. In a nutshell, today and for more than 71 years, we continue to enjoy close bilateral relation. We are two democracies that share a common vision for peace and prosperity. We share similar cultures, similarities in values, heritage, and civilization. Our two countries also enjoy cordial cooperation, and in many occasions we extended support to each other in various international forums, such as in the UN, in the NAM, OIC, WTO, and many others. I'd like to point out that during the bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Shahid Hakan Abbasi in 2018, Indonesian President Joko Widodo made two important references as follows. First, the historical closeness between Pakistan and Indonesia should be developed into real cooperation for the welfare and prosperity of people from our two countries. And second, Indonesia and Pakistan share similarity as democratic nation with large Muslim population. It should be used, therefore, to encourage cooperation in the Islamic world, to promote moderate Islam and unity of the Ummah, help in the struggle of the Palestinian people, and improve the economy of people through halal certification, for instance, and Sharia-based businesses. Although our world has not fully recovered from the pandemic COVID-19, I'm pleased to note that the economic relationship between Indonesia and Pakistan still stay stronger. In the economic sector, according to the Ministry of Trade, the total bilateral trade in 2021 is approaching $4 billion, an increase of around 54% in comparison to 2020. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on this celebrated occasion, I truly appreciate how the Indonesian Embassy in Pakistan and the University of Peshawar embarked on the Indonesian Corner to increase comprehensive knowledge about Indonesia to young generation in Pakistan. I'm confident that this program will help, especially the young generation from Pakistan, to explore in depth the various topics about Indonesia that arise from the dialogues, the series of dialogue. You will learn more about Islam and nationalism in Indonesia, Indonesia's experience in democracy, Indonesia's economy, Indonesia's potential in Sharia economy and halal market, and ASEAN, and so many other topics, which is very interesting, as you say. Well, in the end, I sincerely hope and appreciate, again, I'd like to reiterate my appreciation of all the cooperation between the embassy and the university to make this event possible. And I certainly hope this event will benefit us all and will contribute to the further strengthening of bilateral relations between our two countries. I thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Jazakallah for your words, Dr. Faisal. Now moving on with today's session. As we know, the topic or the agenda for today's session is Discourse on Islam and Nationalism in Indonesia. Now, Indonesia is a country that has the largest Muslim population in the world. Approximately 87% of its 270 million population is Muslim. But despite these stats, Indonesia is not an Islamic state. Its 1945 constitution and its Pancasila national ideology guarantee freedom of all religions. So navigating between Islam and nationalism has been a constant debate throughout Indonesia's history since its inception. But how does this discourse continue to resonate in modern Indonesia? For this, we have our guest speaker, the esteemed Dr. Abdul Karim, who is joining us from the Department of Politics and Government of the University of Gajah Mada. But first, a very concise introduction of our distinguished speaker is due. So Dr. Abdul Karim did his bachelor's in government studies, his master's in Asian studies, and his doctorate in political science. Presently, he is working as the head of Department of Politics and Government in the University of Gajah Mada. He is the editor-in-chief of Electoral Governance Journal Indonesia. He is the director of Association of Political Risk and Settlement Analysts, or PARES for short, PARES. He is also the coordinator of the Consortium for Electoral Governance Education. In recent years, he has been part of major research and consultant activities in diverse capacities as researcher, coordinator, consultant, trainer, and facilitator. Apart from that, he has numerous significant publications. The most recent one, his 2021 report, Repression and Resilience, Diagnosing Closing Space Mid-Pandemic. That being said, Dr. Abdul Karim, you have the floor. You may.
Thank you. Is it my turn now, Asha? Well, good afternoon, everyone. Professor Muhammad Idris, the Vice Chancellor of UOP, Bapak Duta Besar, Pak Adam Tugio, and also Pak Tengku Faisal, and all the audience. It's afternoon here in Bogor. I'm currently in Bogor, in the outskirts of Jakarta. First, let me check if my voice can be heard properly.
So you are perfectly audible. Please continue.
Okay, thank you. Miss Aisha, how long do I have to do my presentation?
So you have an hour.
Okay, I'm taking less than that, I guess. So
Okay, that's good then.
please let me please allow me to share my screen. I'm making presentations on the Pancasila, and the topic today is that can anyone see my presentation?
Yes, sir, it's on the screen, it's visible.
Oh, thank you very much.
It's on the screen.
Yeah, so this afternoon, I will be talking about the Indonesian state ideology that is mentioned earlier. Our state ideology is Pancasila. In this session, I'm going to present how Pancasila has become the compromise among a number of ideologies in Indonesia. And my argument is that although it is accepted by the whole nation, this agreement has been repeatedly renegotiated across the history of Indonesia. So the structure of my presentation will be like this. First, I will introduce the country in general, and we are going to look at how history has shaped this country into a plural society. And then I will present how we have been debating the state ideology during the course of history since Indonesia's independence in 1945. In the third phase of my presentation, we will look at how Sharia works today in Indonesia. And then the last part of my presentation will be on the prospect and agenda of ideology, the state ideology in Indonesia. So once again, let me highlight what I've mentioned earlier, that Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world. So Indonesia is predominantly Muslim, but we choose not to establish an Islamic state here in Indonesia for a number of reasons that I'm going to talk about this afternoon. So basically, we are a secular state, but I have to put the secular in between quotation marks because we are not entirely a secular state, and I will show you why we are not entirely a secular state, although we are not a religious state either. We are not an Islamic state either, despite the fact that almost 86% of the populations are Muslim. So let us look at the country feature. Indonesia is a plural society, and this condition is shaped by history. Indonesia is a country located between Asia and Australia, and it's an archipelago of nations, and it's a very large one. And some of the social features of Indonesia, once again, we are predominantly Muslim. I said 86, but in fact it is 87. About 87 of the populations are Muslim. We are an archipelago that has more than 17,000 islands. Some said that we have 23,000 islands. That depends on how you define island. Sometimes people also define the huge rock in the ocean as an island, and that makes the counting reach as high as 23,000 islands. But if you define island only those inhabitable things on the oceans, then the number goes down to 17,000 islands. So again, it depends on how you define island. We have today a little more than 273 million people. In 1945, when we established the nation, we only had 70 million people in our population. These days, it's more than threefold of the population. It's almost four times as large as what we had in 1945. That makes us the fourth most populous country in the world. And Java, where I am now, Java is the island with the highest density on the planet. It's almost 1,000 people per kilometer square live in Java. It's very, very problematic handling the population issue in Java. And that is one of the reasons why we are currently moving our capital from Jakarta to another place in the island of Kalimantan. In a hope, one of the other hopes to reduce the density in Java, and particularly in the Indonesian capital territory of Jakarta. We have hundreds of ethnic groups across the nation, and we have hundreds of religious groups. But, however, the state only acknowledge much lesser than hundreds of religious groups. We acknowledge only 6 larger religions in Indonesia. And while the other smaller religious group sometimes are considered as just a group of philosophical belief. In Indonesia, we call it the aliran kepercayaan. So these are the social features of Indonesia. And although we will look at later, the vast majority of Indonesians are Muslim. In fact, Muslims it's not single. There are different types of Muslim. At the very least, we can divide Muslims in Indonesia as modernist Islam and traditional Islam. Although this definition is problematic and might no longer be accurate today, but it is still used until today that modernist Muslim best represented by Muhammadiyah organization, and while the traditional Islam represented by the Nahdlatul Ulama movement. Other than that, we have regions that are predominantly Protestant in the eastern part of Indonesia, or Catholics in some other part, or Hindu, for example, in Bali and some parts of Kalimantan. So again, this is the social feature of the country. And let us look the political future. Let us look at the state ideology. Has been mentioned many times earlier that our state ideology is Pancasila. The word Pancasila itself comes from the Sanskrit word meaning the 5 principle. Pancha means 5, Sila means principle. We call this state ideology 5 principle or Pancasila because it consists of 5 dominant ideology in Indonesia, in the world, in fact. So we have nationalism, we have internationalism, we have democracy, we have humanism, we have belief in God. I will show you later how the first president of the Republic of Indonesia explained these principles in the UN Assembly in 1950s. But at this stage, let me emphasize that this state ideology has been imposed and implemented systematically since 1945. However, it is also negotiated and renegotiated when it is possible. When there are opportunity to renegotiate this state ideology, there are always some group of people that negotiate the state ideology, both entirely or partly negotiated. We will discuss this further in details. And this is the speech given by the President Sukarno. I hope you can hear the voice clearly. Oh, it takes a little while to load. Is the voice audible from there? Can everyone hear the voice from the video?
No, sir.
No,
No?
sir. Raise the volume, please, or turn the captions on. Yeah, raise the volume or turn the captions on, please.
Is there any voice?
No, sir.
I'm sorry?
A very dim voice, sir.
Let me see how I do.
As preamble to our constitution, the
How about it now?
Yes,
Yes,
sir,
so
it's
now it's
audible
fine.
now.
Okay, let me repeat from the beginning.
we had proclaimed our independence in August 45, we attached as preamble to our constitution the Pancasila, the 5 guiding principles of our national life. First, believe in God. Second, nationalism. Third, humanity. Fourth, democracy. Fifth, social justice. Presiden Soekarno lebih memikat hati para pemimpin rakyat Amerika ini dan sekali lagi mendapat tepuk tangan yang gemuruh ketika
So those are the 5 principles in short, but then in 1945, we formulated the 5 principles in more sophisticated narrative. And that's the official formulation of the state ideology of Pancasila. But nevertheless, the 5 principles is what Sukarno mentioned in his speech in 1956. So once again, although this is a uniting ideology, but nonetheless, there are always some group of people, mostly from Muslim groups, that have some ideas of negotiating this ideology in Indonesia. And it has been in the history for quite a while, and we will look at the details in a moment. Well, let me turn my. All right. There will be some details that I'm going through, and if there are some things that need to be clarified, please don't hesitate to ask me a question or text me in the chat box. All right, so all right. So let's look at the course of history. My main argument here is that Indonesia has been going through series of ideological debates and conflicts that brought nationalism vis-a-vis the religion, and in this case is Islam. And in this picture, you can see one of the most historical meeting among the founding fathers of the nations. The man who is standing and giving speech is Sukarno, our first president, and the other people are the members of the Council for Indonesian Independence Preparations. This is the picture. This picture is believed to be the picture where they debate the ideology. They talk about the ideology. They formulate the 5 principles, and later they formulate the name of Pancasila. But again, since the very early days of the independence, there has been some different views on how the religion, in this case Islam, is put together with nationalism. Let us look at the timeline. One of the earliest debate on how the role of religion in the country is in 1934. It was still the colonial state, and our name is still the Dutch East Indies. and it's a colonial states in the late 1800s, following the era of the VOC, the Verenigde Oost-Indische Company. In 1930s, we have our first parliament in the colonial state. It's called the Volksraad, or the People's Council. And the membership of this council were appointed by the government, and it's consists of some people from different background, including from the Muslim group. One of the representative institutions of the Indonesian Muslim group come from the so-called MIAI, or Majlisul Islam A'la Indonesia, the highest council of Indonesian Muslim. And one of the ideas brought forward by representative of MIAI was the integration of tax, the government tax, and zakat. In these ideas, Muslims are not supposed to pay twice from their income. They don't have to pay tax and at the same time paying zakat. The representative of MIAI urged that the government integrate zakat and tax, and for those who already paid zakat, 2.5% can have the deduction from their tax. This is a very a quantum leap, if you like, because these days many countries implement these ideas where the government tax is deducted by the zakat that they already paid for the amil. So that is one of the seats of the debates on how we integrate the religion into the state management. But then it's not until 1945 that it takes more blatant and open debates. In 1945, in June, in May, in the late May 1945, we had the first meeting to formulate the design of new Indonesian state. Back then, it was the islands of Indonesia was under the Japanese occupation during the Second World War. Again, Sukarno gave speech in the 1st of June 1945, and then he offered 5 world religion as the base of Indonesian state religion. And the small council consisting of 9 people then formulate Sukarno's offer into the Pancasila, the 5 principles. Including in this principle is the promise of Sharia. The first principle says that Indonesian state is based on the belief in God with the obligations to implement Islamic Sharia for the adherent of Islam. Many people believe, many historians believe, in fact, the earlier leader of Indonesia hold this belief too, that the first principle of Pancasila was in fact about the state obligation to implement Sharia. So if it is implemented, then it is the state obligations to implement Sharia for the Muslims only, not for the entire nations, only for Muslims. But then some group of people, some group of politicians back then in 1945 expressed their concern about the specific mention of Islam in the state principle. So they urged that the first principle reformulated, not believe in God with the obligations to implement Islamic Sharia for the adherent, but it reformulated into just believing in a single supremacy God. And that's what we had in 18th of August 1945. So that is our state ideology as we started the nations. But then in 1955, we had our first elections. We elected the members of the parliament, and then in different months, we elected the member of a special structure called Constituante. Constituante is in an institution to formulate our constitution, because in 1945, we did have constitutions, but this constitution was regarded as temporarily constitutions. So a special structure whose members were elected in 1945 was assigned to formulate a new constitutions. Within this constituante institutions, there was a debate. Once again, we reopened the debate of the state ideology. Representative from the Masyumi, Majelis Syuro Muslimin Indonesia, the continuation of MIAI, offered Islam to be the state ideology. And it gained quite significant support from other members of the Constituante. And in 1957, there was some efforts to vote for the ideology, whether we were going to vote for Islam as the state ideology or Pancasila as state ideology. But then in 1958 to 1959, there was some series of political unrest, political turmoil in Indonesia, as some local military leaders raised their arms and started rebellions against the central government. So in 1959, President Sukarno decided to dismiss the Constituante and reinstated the 1945 constitutions with Pancasila in it. So the debate was put into the halt, and people were no longer talking about the state ideology in the Constituante or in the National Council. So from 1959, then Sukarno held the centralized power in his hand. But then in 1965, he was brought down from power, and Indonesia experienced transition to the so-called the new order under the leadership of General Suharto, who was effectively the president of the Republic of Indonesia in 1967. During his office, General Suharto continued to secure Pancasila as the state principle. And in 1982 to 1984, he decreed that all institutions in Indonesia, both state and society, should accept Pancasila as the sole principle. Should accept Pancasila as the sole principles and having no other principles than Pancasila. So it is official that Islam cannot be used as an ideology of any institutions. That happened in 1984. But then in 1988, as General Suharto again, there was again circulation of power in Indonesia, and General Suharto was brought down from power. There was a political reform, and there was a reopening of the ideological debate. Some politicians started to highlight the need to look at both constitutions and the state ideology. Only this time, they did not question the Pancasila as state ideology in general. They only put question mark on the first principle, belief in the single almighty God. They remind that we have the so-called Jakarta Chapter in 1945, saying that the first principle is believe in God with the obligations to implement Sharia Islam for its adherents. Now, this idea was quickly aborted, but we did amend the constitutions without touching Pancasila. Not even a single letter of Pancasila is touched. And then since the 2000s, there start some local Sharia implementation and the Sharia banking that I will talk about this later in more detail. Now, at this stage, let me highlight that although the idea of the state, let me repeat again. The idea that the state principle mentioned about the state obligation to implement Sharia Islam was rejected So the formulation was rejected. The formulations that the state is obliged to implement Islamic Sharia was rejected. So there is nothing saying about the obligation to implement Sharia Islam, but in practice, we actually, the state is actually implement Sharia Islam for Muslim, for the Islamic adherents. For example, we have the Ministry of Religious Affairs Indonesia since the beginning. Is the continuation of the structure since the Japanese occupation era. It was called Shumubu back then under Japanese occupations, but then we call it the Ministry of Religious Affairs. And basically this ministry is dealing with the Islamic Sharia. For example, the beginning of Ramadan and the first of Shawwal, which is the Eid al-Fitri, are decided by the Ministry of Religious Affairs through a series of assembly. So it is about the Islamic Sharia. Also, the Hajj, the pilgrimage, has been facilitated by the state. It's been managed very detailed. And so far, it is one of the best Hajj management in the world because it's very large in size, but it's always tend to be successful. It is managed by the state. Also, we have the Islamic laws covering marriage, education, inheritance, and so forth. If you are Muslims in Indonesia, then your marriage will be held by the so-called religious affair office. We also have religious court that deals with some issues of inheritance, for example, debts in Islam, or divorce and marriage in Islam. So again, my point is that in practice, the government of Indonesia actually implement the Islamic Sharia without saying it. The implementation of Sharia in practice goes without saying. So again, although the formulation in Pancasila doesn't say anything about the state obligation, the fact is it is handled as state obligations. Now, so that is how the timeline of history, how we debate. And then let's look at what happened today. Sharia today, although again, as I mentioned earlier, there are still some group of people that has in their mind the idea to renegotiate Pancasila and renegotiate the state ideology, renegotiate the Indonesian secularism. But Sharia is no longer a strongly ideological theme. It's no more very strong ideological theme. It's more pragmatic theme. The Sharia is now appears at local levels and in financial sectors. It's no longer a big theme that are debated by the people. Let's look at two of them. First, local Sharia. These days, following the amendment of the constitutions in early 20s, there are many local regulations that are partly or entirely based on Islamic values. For example, many local government banned alcohol and gambling activities. Some regions prohibit the gathering of men and women who are not legally bound in marriage. And that's what they call as the Sharia regulation at local level. We have seen that the vast majority of Indonesia were Muslim, and in eastern part and in middle part, Indonesia is also geographically Muslim. But then in some provinces are predominantly Christians. So what happened in some predominantly Muslim countries are mimicked by regions with different religious dominations, although it's not a very large phenomenon. These days, 24 out of 34 provinces in Indonesia have regulations that are inspired both partly or entirely by religious law, particularly Sharia. And the most interesting fact is that this idea of local regulations, local Sharia, were mostly initiated by secular political parties. We have a number of political parties. Some of them have Islamic values as their base, or they have Islamic groups as their social base. But the Sharia, local Sharia, were mostly not their ideas, not the ideas of these Islamic political parties. They were mostly initiated by secular political parties. Most likely, the reason is to gain more popular support, as there was the growing commitment to everything religious in Indonesia. So this is Sharia law. In this picture, you can see the implementations of the, I believe the man here, the man in white standing in white shirt and brown trousers, were caught doing gambling in the province of Aceh, and he got beaten by this the guy in brown. It is part of the local Sharia in Aceh, and they do so in public as part of the prevention. But this is only happened in Aceh, not in other part of Indonesia. So that's about the local Sharia. Another interesting is the Sharia banking. Sharia banking is the financial system based on Islamic concepts of non-riba finance. And this idea is generally accepted. However, there are some ongoing debates on the definition of riba and whether or not the bank interest is riba according to Islamic value. There has been some debate. And this phenomenon is demand driven, because there were some growing concerns of some Muslims on the conventional banking interest. Many Muslims in Indonesia believe that bank interest is riba, and they are not supposed to eat riba. So there has been some growing demand on the Sharia banking in Indonesia, and it is responded very quickly by the conventional bank by opening their Sharia branches. So some conventional banks normally will have the Sharia chapters of the bank, except for some bank owned by the Chinese non-Muslim people in Indonesia. And the idea of Sharia banking is strongly, or has been strongly, supported by the government through banking regulations and institutions. Just recently, last year, the government strengthened the Bank Syariah Indonesia, the Indonesian Sharia Bank. And today, this BSI, the Bank Syariah Indonesia, control, or at least manage or coordinate, no less than 40% of the Sharia banking in the country. So it started to be government control, and it's a huge business. Sharia banking in Indonesia is a huge business because there are it is safer for some people to do transaction in the Sharia banking, in a sense that their business partner will not question the banking system. While if you are doing business through the conventional banking system, there are chances that your business partner may question the method and demand the use of Sharia banking instead. So that's why the popularity is growing, because it can be easily agreed by the business counterparts. So that is the expressions of Sharia Indonesia today. So rather than debating on the nationalism versus Islam as ideology, people start to blend them together in a more pragmatic ways in Indonesia. And now last but not least, the prospect and the agenda. So where are we going on the idea of the nationalism versus Islam, secular versus religious state? I believe that the prospect that Indonesia in the future will remain a nationalist, semi-secular state with implementations of Islamic-based regulations in various sectors. Now we have started on the banking system, then there is a serious effort to control the halal certification by the Ministry of Religious Affairs, and in other sectors, including, for example, halal tourism. The state will implement better regulations and control over this business. So in general, we will not call ourselves as an Islamic country or Islamic state, but many regulations in Indonesia will be strongly based on Islamic belief. I also believe that debates on the role of religions will continue to exist in the country, whether or not the religion can be the state ideology or is just the source of inspirations. But I also believe that these debates will take more pragmatic tones rather than ideological tones. As I mentioned earlier, as the examples, people are talking more about Islamic banking. Other example is people are talking about the Islamic fashion. They are not too busy with the ideological issue anymore. The conflict now is now taking more pragmatic tones. And the agenda, what agenda we have? Here's the problem. We have regions with local Sharia, but yet the corruptions in Indonesia is still a big problem. Clean government is still a big issue in Indonesia. So for me, the future role of Islamic values is to promote better Indonesia. And as for now, this role is yet to be seen. We don't see the direct effect of the implementation of local Sharia to the quality of government services and provincial or municipal levels. They use the Sharia at local level as more the theme for the political party to gain support. For me, Islamic values should enable Indonesia to achieve the country's ultimate agenda, and the most difficult one at the same time. We need to promote clean and accountable government, and the Islamic values should be able to encourage this to happen. And we need to improve the prosperity and general well-being of the people. So I think that's the future agenda of Islamic values in Indonesia vis-a-vis the nationalism. There is no need to challenge Indonesian nationalism any longer, but it is for the Islamic activists and the bearer of Islamic values to prove that Islam can be productive to improve Indonesia as a clean and accountable government, and that are able to provide prosperity for the people. And last but not least, if you want to understand further the issues of nationalism and Islam in Indonesia, there is this important and interesting books edited by Robert Hefner. It's entitled The Routledge Handbook of Contemporary Indonesia. There are also some other articles that are talking specifically about the renegotiations of Pancasila in Indonesian state. This book can be downloaded from this link that I provided on the screen. Is ugm.id/handbook IND, and it is case sensitive. I can also share this link in the chat column later. So thank you. We have to stop my presentation here, and I would welcome your comment and question. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. The lecture was very informative and gave a comprehensive understanding of the ideological makeup of Indonesia. Jazakallah, sir. The floor is now open for questions. Will now be a question answer session. Students, participants that have any questions, please come forth, raise your hands. You have the floor. You'll be selected to ask the question. Please keep it short and mind your tones. Please come forth and pose your questions towards the speaker. Do you have any questions? Students, do you have any questions, please? Raise your hand. This is. Please introduce yourself and ask your question. From Dr. Abdul Karim. Hello, students.
Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum Assalam.
This is Aisha Wahid, and I'm a student of BBA, doing my specialization in finance.
Right.
Sir, I have a question that you explain your ideology and all the 5 points, but you didn't tell that what is the role of your public in this, what your public demands and what your public is supporting. Like in all this political unrest and the changes and the Sharia changes that the government has applied.
All right, Aisha Wahid, thanks. Thank you for your question. Please turn your mic off. So her question was about the say of public in the national ideology.
I'm sorry, Aisha, what was the question again?
It was about the role of public in shaping the national ideology, Pancasila, and what they have to say about it.
Okay. Yes, thank you for the questions. It's not always easy to say what the public wants about the ideology, because once Indonesia is the mixture of different background, and in 1945 we were actually building this nation from smaller nations, if you like, with kind of different histories in the past. And the state ideology was something that is designed from above by the elite founding fathers, and there has been no public consultation since the beginning. We never had, for example, what is it called, the public consultation through elections? Now I forget the name. The word, it just escaped my mind. But normally, if you want to change regulations or to implement some regulations, you can ask the people permissions. There has been no such activity in Indonesia. There has been no such mechanism in Indonesia regarding Pancasila. Pancasila has always been the elite from above design, so without people having any say about that. But then currently, in general public atmosphere, Pancasila is fully accepted, except from some smaller groups. Pancasila is fully accepted as the national ideology. But again, some group of people, particularly from Muslim background, still question how the role of Islam in this national state. But Pancasila itself has never been in a strong question. Indonesian public in Indonesia in general are not very ideological. And among other factors, it's because of the design by the state since 1967 to 1998 that detach people from ideological debates and discussion. So again, in Indonesia, there has been no strong public debate or discussion regarding the state ideology. It's only it's only discussed or debated by some smaller intellectual groups. I hope that answered questions.
Right, thank you, sir. Zulkifil Hassan, you may turn your mic on and ask your question, please.
I had a question. Can I ask?
Sure, go ahead.
I wanted to ask, since Indonesia has a rich and diversified experience and expertise in Sharia economy and Islamic banking, in this regard, do you see any cooperation between Pakistan and Indonesia in the future?
Yes, I think Indonesia and Pakistan share the same social features in general. So we have the same concern regarding some aspect of conventional banking and conventional economic exchange, and in the belief that Islam offers some better ways in doing economy and banking. I think many people in Indonesia share the same view with many people in Pakistan, and it can be the good basis for future cooperations, if not already been done these days. So yes, Mr. Hassan, I believe that we have there are some future for closer cooperations between two countries in this regard. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, even though I'm moderator, I'm also a student, so I also have a question. So how can Indonesia claim to be, just a second, you're after, I'll call on you after this, all right? You can ask your questions. Right, so how can Indonesia claim to be a secular state when Islam and Sharia are such an integral part of its system and its society?
Okay. So the best way to understand that is by looking at two aspects of the country. First, the demography and the geography. So demographically speaking, we are a predominantly Muslim country. Again, with 87 something % of the people are Muslim. Then it's easy to see the demands of the implementations of some aspect of Sharia law. For example, Haji. Haji is Indonesia, the Haji pilgrimage is one of the largest in the world. So there has been some always made demands on that. Halal food also always in high demand. The marriage, 87% of people in Indonesia needs to do their marriage in Muslim way. So that's the basis of the implementation of some Sharia of Islam Indonesia by the state without even saying that we are an Islamic state. But why we choose to be a secular state? We need to look at the geographical aspect of Indonesia. A big chunk of Indonesia in terms of geography are predominantly non-Muslim, Christians, Catholics, and Hinduism. And every effort to formally implement Sharia in Indonesia, to claim to be an Islamic state in Indonesia, has always been rejected by this part of the country. So this is the interesting thing in Indonesia, that we implement the Sharia, but we cannot claim to be a country with Sharia law. Once we claim that, then some people raise their hand and reject the idea. But if the government manages the Haji, there will be no, there are no people that say there are rejection on that. So I think that's the situation I should think.
All right, thank you, sir. Abdullah, you can ask your question now. please turn your mic on.
Assalamu alaikum.
Is it me or just
Am
my
I
Abdullah
audible?
here, he had a question. Please turn your mic on
Assalamu
and
alaikum.
pose your question. Is it?
Assalamu alaikum.
Yes.
I would like to ask
Yeah.
that
Ask your
Indonesia
question,
as a
Abdullah.
state is moving. Indonesia as a state moving towards secularism. So how does it trying to navigate? Would be trying to navigate its relations, diplomatic relations with, especially Muslim countries in the region, and in particular Pakistan, which always emphasized special relations with Muslim fraternal countries. So how would Indonesia will navigate through these international difficulties and complexities?
Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, I'm no expert on international relations. I could not give you expert opinion on that matter, but from a more general political perspective, I believe that although the state-to-state relationship might not be entirely compatible, but then society to society may provide some compatibility between Indonesia and Pakistan. So the fact that we are the most populous Muslim country in the world, although it's not formally Islamic State, is the door for a better relationship or good relationship with Pakistan so far. Again, there is my opinion as a political scientist who is not specializing in international relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Zulkifil Hassan has another question. Please turn your mic on and pose your question.
Sir, I had another question. Do you have any special derivatives for Sharia banking in your country, which may be used for further recovery of macroeconomy in your country?
Yes, both the state institutions and some non-government organizations have the kind of effort to help the small economy in Indonesia. For example, we are talking the non-state actors. We have the Muhammadiyah institutions, Muhammadiyah movement, and the Nahdlatul Ulama movement. They were dealing with the macroeconomics people, helping them to manage their financial aspect. For example, in cooperation with an institution called the Pegadaian. Pegadaian is well, I'm sorry, what is Pegadaian in English? Can somebody help me? Pegadaian. It's something like, well, again, this is an economic institution. What the Nahdlatul Ulama movement has been doing is, yeah, the pawn shop is a statewide pawn shop where it started as a pawn shop where you bring your stuff for cash, and then the stuff will be returned back to you when you pay the cash back with interest. But then these days, the Pegadaian institution works beyond the pawn activities. It helps, for example, small macroeconomics people to invest their money daily. Well, for example, if you are selling food on the street, then your chances to save your money is very small, because you use all the money to survive and to move your business. But then the Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah movement, working together with other institutions, are encourage these street vendors to invest their money in gold. For example, you can buy gold for as small as 0.1 grams through the pawn shop. You don't buy gold, but you save your money in there, and the amount of your money is translate it into the weight of gold, and you put note in there. So for example, in 10 years, you will have like 10 grams of gold, and it can be used for your to expand your business. This is an example how the Indonesian Islamic institutions deal with the problem of macroeconomics. So thank you.
Other questions, students? If not, then I have another question for you, sir. So we talked about Islam and nationalism in Indonesia, but strictly in the domestic sphere. I wanted to ask, what is the place of Islam in Indonesia's foreign policy? And to what extent does Indonesia make foreign policy decisions on the basis of its ideological ends? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Aisha. There has been many works on these issues. At least there are 2 books written on Islam and Indonesian foreign policy. One, I believe, was written by Dr. Rizal Sukma, who was later the ambassador of the Indonesian ambassador in London, and the other was Dr. Banyu Perwita. Both of these works looks at the role of Islam in Indonesian foreign policy, and one of the arguments of these books was that Islam plays a significant role in shaping Indonesians' view on some international problems. For example, on the problems of the Israeli occupation in Palestine, it's the works argue that Indonesian foreign policy is very much shaped by Islamic values in looking at the problems, the conflict between the Palestinian and the Israeli people. And also in other parts of the world where there are some problems with Islamic communities in other countries, Indonesia always step forward and raise the concern. And again, it's a reflection of the role of Islam in Indonesian foreign policy. Also, Indonesia plays significant role in the OIC, the Nations of Islamic Council, and I believe our diplomacy can give better explanation regarding that. So again, Aisha, in general, Islam plays significant role in Indonesian foreign policy, as significant as it is in the domestic policy. Thank you. Is Aisha frozen? She's not moving on my screen.
Yes, sir.
I think she has a connection problem.
Yes, who wants to ask a question? I think someone just spoke up. Please turn your mic on and ask your question. Abdul Basit, I think. Who was it? Yes, Wagma, you may turn your mic on and ask your question, please. Please be quick. Yes, Wagma's mic was on. Please ask your question. Okay, they left, I think. All right, are there any more questions? Please respond, students.
Am I audible?
Yes, you will. Please introduce yourself and pose your question.
I'm from Department of International Relations. And my question is that, as you said, since 1945, there's implementation of Pancasila. So, sir, don't you think there is a discrimination between these 5 principles? As the first principle is the implementation of Sharia, and then moving on, we are moving to democracy and social justice. And as you said, the 24 out of 34 provinces, they are in favor of the implementation of Sharia. So, what about those? About the minorities, like the banking system and other forms, they are according to the Sharia. So what about their rights?
Okay, thank you, Akbar, for your question. And it is indeed a very important and well, ongoing questions in Indonesia regarding the minority rights. There has been some issues with regard to minority rights in Indonesia. For example, regarding the marriage. If you are Muslims marrying another Muslim, then you are perfectly just fine. Everything will be fine with regard to your the administrative aspect of your marriage. But if you are a non-Muslim, your marriage will be handled by the civic by the civil public office, something like that. It's a kantor catatan sipil. But then there have been some issues. If it is interreligious marriage, then the state tends to unable to facilitate this. And also, this happens to smaller religious group. If you are a part of the larger group like Christians or Catholicism, and your life is much easier than those who are the adherents of local religious groups. So I'm not saying that Pancasila as a general agreement of the Indonesian people has no problem with the minority groups. Indeed, we still have that large problem, and in Indonesia we are still finding the best way to fix that. There has been some civil society movement to urge the state to give better handling to religious minority. So as you imply in your question, yes, we do have some problems with religious minority in Indonesia, and some group of people, some activists, some intellectuals has been raising their concern about that, and we are still finding the better way to do that. So thank you, Rockman. Back to you, Aisha.
Atala, do you want to ask your question now? Atala, do you want to ask? Hello, sorry, I had some connectivity problems. I hope I'm still audible.
Yes, you are still.
Yes, so are there any more questions? Yeah, are there any more questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please continue. Please ask your question.
Sir, you said it is non-river finance in Asia. So how do you take this non-river finance internationally, and how do you implement this in your nation? Like in Pakistan, the Islamic banks are not truly Islamic. There are some policies that are matching to the commercial banks. There are some policies which are claimed to be having in trust, and they are not interest free. So is there any such case in Indonesia?
Yes, Aisha, I hope I catch your question correctly. But in Indonesia, we the Sharia banking system has never been actually solve or give answers to the perennial question regarding the interest system that to some people it is really similar to the riba system. But again, we don't actually change that mechanism. In many cases, the Sharia banking just changed the name, the term used for that interest. In Sharia banking in Indonesia, we don't use the terms interest. We use the terms the benefit split or something like that. So it is to avoid the debate on the status of the banking because of the interest system. So the interest is still there, but in Sharia banking, it's calculated as the share of the benefit between the bank and the consumers. To me, I'm sorry, I'm no expert in economy. The practice to a very large extent are the same, both conventional banking and Islamic banking, but they use different terms for the market only. So I hope this answers your question, Aisha.
All right, thank you. Alina Kazi has a question. Please turn your mic on.
This is Alina Kazi from Social Work Department. I have a question. How the Sharia Bank of Indonesia give benefits to the people of Indonesia? Like what sort of a benefits they give to the people?
I'm not sure that I can answer your question with regard to the benefits of the banking, but let's look at this way. Prior to the existence of the Sharia banking in Indonesia, many Indonesians were reluctant to put their money in the banks in a belief that the banking system is not Islamic because of the symptoms of riba. But since the era of the Sharia banking, many more people in Indonesia are bankable. They have the trust to the bank. I don't know if it's beneficial for the people, but again, that's what happened. Now, people use the banking system. It helps to reduce the inflations in the country because the amount of cash significantly reduces. Many people are more comfortable doing their banking with the Sharia banking. Thanks, Alina. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, sir. Are there any more questions? I don't think there are. We'll take one more question if there is any. Usman, do you have a question? Sir Sohrawardi, should we just move on to the closing remarks? I think we're done with the question answer session.
Yes, thank you, Aisha. So yeah, in concluding my session today, I can say that Indonesia has been managed to become a secular state in a way that is acceptable for the people who are predominantly Muslim. And Pancasila has helped us to build a common ground to manage the country, again, still in a more secular manner, but also with a strong hold on Islamic values throughout the government regulations. So I hope that helps you to better understand how Indonesia is a Muslim society, but not an Islamic state. Thank you very much, Aisha.
Thank you, sir. Well, that concludes our session for today. Sir Sohrawardi, would you like to say anything? All right, we can conclude the session. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you to all the speakers. I hope everyone enjoyed and understood, and even though there were technical difficulties, I hope everyone could learn something. Thank you, you're welcome. So yeah, thank you once again for coming. We will meet again in the next session. Participants, first of all, I think we should bid goodbye to our speakers. Allah Hafiz, thank you for joining us. Dr. Abdul Karim and Fikr Fasya. I learned a lot of new pronunciations today. I hope everyone could learn something new. So yeah, you may all now leave the session. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. Terima kasih.